And I think there's also a misconception around you can love your job and still feel burnout. And so what I do is we have 250 entrepreneurs that we work with, and, they're all building and growing and scaling companies, and you're investing in them. It's very much our job is not to have needs. Our job is to pour into them. And so that takes a lot of emotional capital.
Rise up, mind shift, new day, new hustle, street lights, bright ideas, courage through the struggle, focus on the vision, move smart, stay true, from the city to the boardroom, we breaking through, shift gears, new fears, but we thrive in attention, turn lessons into action, goals into intention, don't blink, stay up, every player's precision, welcome to mind shift, where ambition meets the mission.
I am Melissa Vincent. I am the CEO of Pipeline Entrepreneurs. Pipeline is a program for entrepreneurs who are looking to grow and scale their companies here in Kansas, Nebraska, and Missouri.
When you're at your lowest point on this journey, what was really going on in your life?
I feel like burnout is one of those words where, you can look at it in small scale, and then you can look at it in where it's like really almost debilitating. And when I'm talking to other people about burnout, one of the things I always say is like, look at all the areas of your life. Because typically when you're dealing with burnout, it's not just your job. It is your job plus home stress plus, X other factors, right? Your social life, all of these kind of categories. And so for me, when I was struggling with burnout, it wasn't that I have a job that is very demanding. I have a job that I absolutely love. And I think there's also a misconception around you can love your job and still feel burnout. And so what I do is we have 250 entrepreneurs that we work with, and, they're all building and growing and scaling companies, and you're investing in them. It's very much our job is not to have needs. Our job is to pour into them. And so that takes a lot of emotional capital. And so you have to be replenishing that emotional capital somewhere. Otherwise, you can lead to burnout. And so for me, that time period was when I was going through very high energy expenditure with work, where we were growing the organization, working on new grants, which is very time consuming. And then at the same time, also dealing with being in this kind of sandwich generation where I have a 15-year-old son, I'm a single mom, and I have parents who are aging and starting to have health issues. And so when I think about what I tell other people about, look at the categories of your life, and what's going on in each of those areas was being impacted. So my parents were having health issues. My job was at this point of very deep work and focus and energy, and all your extra time is spent on that. And then you're being a mom to a 15-year-old son. And so when you look at that combination of things, I don't think you can expend that much energy in every area and not struggle with burnout, which is what ultimately was happening with me.
In that season, what was the loudest thing in your head? Like the exact sentence you kept telling yourself?
I kept telling myself over and over, because I hoped that I would believe it at some point, you got this, you can do this. And I would catch myself, which is how I always know, like, I'm struggling with burnout, walking through my house and just being, you can do this. Like, not even realizing that I was saying it, but being that deep in, there's so much noise, there's so much going on. And, one of the things with being a CEO is that, and it's the same with our entrepreneurs, and I think it's why I love doing what I do so much, is it's very lonely. You don't have, when you're the entrepreneur that's leading the organization, when you're the CEO leading entrepreneurs, there's not this feedback loop of people saying, you've got this, you're the one telling everyone no. And so it almost becomes this thing where you need to tell yourself, you've got this. And experience tells you, okay, I've gotten through all of these other, seasons that were difficult or times of feeling like I was going to burn out. But you have to remind yourself of that in the moment. It's like these little mini pep talks. And I think the other thing is that I would also remind myself that I can do hard things. I've been through such difficult situations, and none of that stopped me. You just keep getting back up, and you put one foot in front of the other, and you do the next right thing and the next right thing, and, try to really focus on the foot that's right in front of you versus 5 steps ahead. And having that focus helps. But I think it's really the mantra of like, you've got this. Like, who else is going to remind you that you can do it? And sometimes that's just yourself, that you just have to tell yourself that you can get through it because you can.
What doubts or thoughts were on repeat during that time?
So the biggest doubts that were on repeat were, can I do this? Which is why I think what you tell yourself is, you've got this. It's almost like the feedback loop is, can you do this? And then you almost have to have the other side of like the angel and the devil, right? Like, you can't do this. And then you have this other that's reminding you yourself that you can. But the doubt is that you won't be able to either get it all done or handle the pressure. And at the end of the day, the biggest fear with that is that you're going to let people down. And whether, when you're talking about like multiple layers of your life that are under stress. So, your work side, your family side, your, personal life, you really start to like, how am I going to get through this? How am I going to get these done? Because each of those areas feels like it doesn't have anything that can be like, you can't remove something. So, if you're struggling with parents who are ill, I can't change that, right? If you have a child who needs to get to school, get to practice, do all those things, like, you can't change that. And then with work, there's just things that have to get done. And so those doubts are like, I'm going to fail someone. I am not going to be able to accomplish this. I'm not going to be able to get everything done that needs to get done to be able to be there for the people that I love and care about. And so you just start to like, the more you go down that trail of like, I'm going to let people down because I'm not going to be able to get all of this done, the more it debilitates you, which is why, just having that one foot in front of the other. Okay, what's the next right thing? What's the next thing I need to do? Versus that kind of future tripping of, I'm going to let everyone down because I have to do all of these things. It just becomes chaos in your mind, and it makes it so much harder to focus on the things that actually need to be done. But it's that fear. It's that fear that you are juggling all of the balls, all of the plates that you're spinning. And if just one of them, slides in the wrong way, everything's going to come crashing down. And the fear of that happening becomes debilitating.
What story were you telling yourself about why things weren't working?
I don't think you can be a good leader without at some point saying, when there's things going on, am I the problem? Is it me? I think good leaders ask themselves that when there's a situation going on that's difficult. And I think if you're not asking yourself that, then, maybe that's part of, maybe you're not struggling with burnout, but when you're struggling with it, you have to say like, okay, what part of this is me? Am I, at the right spot at the right time? Am I the right person to be leading this? Am I, not delegating? Am I taking on more than I should? Have I already taken on more than I should? Like, what are the areas that got me here? And so I think that is really healthy as long as you don't live there. Asking yourself tough questions is really healthy. Taking it the next step and, kind of that shame, guilt spiral of like, oh, I could have delegated that. I could have done this, or, all of those things that we can run through doesn't help us get to where we need to be. And so it's like trying to stick with what is true. So, looking at a situation very honestly and saying, I could have done that better. Okay, maybe I do need to reassess whether I need to delegate more things. Why do I not want to delegate things? You start to kind of process through those different factors, and that gives you data points that you can work with versus a shame spiral or a guilt spiral of, why did I make these decisions? And I think a lot of times when you're struggling with burnout, there's some kind of root cause that is at the, the center of part of it. And then you layer on, like I said, the other areas with your personal life or other things that just compound that. But if you can get to that root piece, then everything else starts to become manageable. And so instead of it being, this spiral, you're able to really kind of unpack it and say, okay, like, there are things I can do better. There are ways I can manage my stress better. Or am I leaving out self-care? What am I doing that is creating this feeling that everything has so compounded that I feel so burnt out? And so I think the more that you can kind of pull the data points, but not be overwhelmed by them, and take them as like data points or information for you to use to get stronger, to get better, to grow, versus data points are overwhelming and are going to like add to the burnout. So it's kind of putting them in their right bucket.
Day to day in that season, what did it feel like emotionally for you?
In the day to day, you're trying to survive. You're trying to keep your head above water. And, there's this strong visual in my mind of just, you're almost like doggy paddling, just trying to keep your head above water and stay above the waves. And, you can only sustain that for so long. You can only, tread water for so long. And when you're in the middle of it, it does feel like, how much longer do I have being able to tread water? And so, there's just a very, I can almost like just remember that feeling, just even thinking back to it. And it feels terrifying. It feels like, you feel very alone. I mean, if you're treading water and there's someone there to rescue you, that's very different. There's an end in sight. And when you're struggling with burnout, you don't see or feel like anyone is coming to rescue you. It feels like you're treading water and you're in a vast ocean and there's no help coming. And so you have to figure out, one, how long can I sustain it? Two, where is there potentially a safety, like an exit, a way for me to be able to like stop treading water and, really trying to get out of that state of mind. But when you're in the middle of it, it feels so overwhelming. It's hard to be able to find those. And I think as leaders, we're very much taught to, you're the one that has it together. You put this essentially mask on to say, I've got it all together. And so part of what's making you tread water is that you're not owning to anyone else the reality of where you are. And that's actually where the life raft is. The life raft is really just owning where you are and asking for help. And I think that's the hardest part, is when you feel like you're treading water and the waves are coming, you don't realize that all you have to do is ask for help. Admitting that you're struggling. There's so many people, there's so many resources who would jump in. But when you're a leader, you feel like you have to have all the answers. You have to have it all together. There's so many people depending on you that you can't let that take that mask off to be able to own the fact that you're struggling. And then once you do, there's such a wave of people being, of course you're feeling burnout. There's all these things going on. And it's this immense relief that you're like, why didn't I just do that sooner? Like, I was treading water for so long rather than just owning the problem and being able to accept the help that inevitably comes from that.
How did that show up in your life? Did you lose sleep, energy, focus? How did you move throughout the day?
Definitely loss of sleep, which when you're not sleeping, it impacts your focus. It impacts your emotions. And so throughout the day, I would have to check myself and say, like, okay, feeling really emotional. Is that because there's something going on, or is it because I didn't sleep? And you lose the ability, the longer you're in that frame of mind, to be able to decipher whether you are feeling that level of stress in that way because you just aren't sleeping, or is it real? And it becomes like a mind game of, am I really, like, I feel like incredibly emotional and I feel very distraught about things that normally wouldn't bother me. And in the very first few days of lack of sleep, you can rationalize that. You're like, yep, didn't sleep, totally fine, get a good night of sleep, and I'll be able to like get right back up there. But when you're that stressed and you're that overloaded in that many areas, the sleep doesn't come. And so then that just compounds, and then you start to lose the ability to say like, oh, I'm just feeling this way because it's lack of sleep. It feels overwhelming. And at the core of it, it is, obviously the stress that's causing you not to sleep, the anxiety feeling. But a huge part of it, at least for me, that lack of sleep piece makes everything so much worse. And the longer it goes, the less you're able to actually say, oh, it's lack of sleep. And all of a sudden it becomes this monster that is like, now I can't sleep. I know I won't be able to fall asleep. Why do I feel like this? Maybe it is as bad as it feels. When in reality, your system is just beyond tired, overwhelmed, stressed, and sleep is such a strong component to be able to like right size that in your mind. And so for me, moving throughout the day would be this battle of, am I really stressed, or is it just because I didn't sleep? And you just play this mental game of, how do I know where I am? And like I said, the longer that goes, the more difficult it becomes to figure out where reality is.
On the days where it feels like everything is going against you, how do you handle it?
When everything feels like it's going against me, one of the anchors that I will do that I find helps me not burn out, and when I am feeling burnt out, helps center me, is I journal in the morning. And so journaling your thoughts allows you to kind of get out some of those emotions. So that's one way. Another is exercise for me. So going for a run, taking my dogs for a walk, something that gets you outside of, where you are mentally. Running allows you to get the endorphins going, kind of like resetting the chemical imbalance that's causing the stress. And, really one of the best things that you can do when you're feeling that way is it's okay to own it. It's okay to say, like, I am stressed, I am feeling all these things, instead of trying to convince yourself that you're not. And one of the reasons why I love journaling so much is you could go back to those journals and see the things that you've been through previously that probably felt more dire than where you are now, and you got through them. And so there is this kind of gratitude piece of, I can do hard things, I can get through things, and I've been through seasons that are really difficult. And not only have I survived them, but I've thrived through them. And so sometimes it's just the act of journaling, and sometimes it's the act of reading your past to say, it's really a beautiful story of resilience. And that story reminds you that in a year from now, when you go back and read, there will be another chapter of your story of resilience.
When stress is maxed and you catch yourself thinking, maybe I'm not built for this, what do you actually do next?
It's a great question. You have to understand your why. If when you're feeling maxed and you are like, I don't know what I'm going to do next, understanding why you do what you do in the first place is such a grounding exercise. What are the things why did you get started in this to begin with? What are the things that give you joy in what you do? Because again, when you're burnt out, there's so many layers to the areas of your life that are impacted, the lack of sleep, the physical components that are happening. And so when you can ground yourself in your why, I am doing this job because I love being able to help entrepreneurs, really create a community around them that gives them the support and the resources they need. I am, taking care of my son because he is such a gift to be able to be a parent to. I am helping my parents because they poured into me. And so it's like, recenter in your why, like why in each of those areas that you feel the stress, what's your why, what centers you in that? And when you can do that, it helps you kind of focus on the right things to get to the next step of what to do. And so you kind of take your brain out of that fight or flight mode and you ground it in purpose. And when you do that, it allows you to take the next step.
Take me through one of those bad days back then, from when you woke up to when you went to bed. What did it look like?
Those days start with getting my son up for school. And, again, it's like you're almost initially putting the mask on of, I've got it together. I've got it together. You don't, want your kids to see like that you're stressed. And so you immediately get up, you put the mask on, and then, you pour into your child. You're taking care of their needs, getting them off to school, doing all of the things. And at the same time, you're almost an autopilot. Like you're not even noticing the joy in those moments. You're just trying to get through. And then you get to the workday, and it's so hard to even start because that's where the overwhelm is of there's so many people that need something from me, and there's only so much capacity that when your emotional bank account it's not even on empty, it's like depleted and like you're in the red. When you get to that point, someone could have a simple need and it just feels like I can't meet that. Like I can't do it. And that's the part where, that's where the stress comes in. Like I'm going to let someone down. I'm going to let someone down. I'm not going to be able to be there for them. Or, when we're helping entrepreneurs, they're going through things in their life. We've had, people lose parents. We've had people lose spouses. And you're trying so hard to show up and be there in that moment. But when you're doing that and meeting that very important real need, all of the business things that you also have to do don't get taken care of. So then you feel overwhelmed where you started your day thinking, I'm going to get all these things done and then I'm going to feel better. Like I have more control over your circumstances. Circumstances aren't happening to you. You have control over them. And so as soon as one thing throws that off, then it would feel like, oh my gosh, I'm so far behind. I started the day feeling far behind. Now I'm even further behind. And then the clock just feels like it's just ticking in your head of like, and now I've got to go pick my son up from track practice. And then, taking your parents to a cardiologist appointment. And so it feels impossible. It feels like there is no way I am going to get this done today. And then you get into the spiral of, and what happens if I don't get it done? And sometimes you can make that be a positive or a negative. You can say, okay, well, if I don't get this done and, if, this, thing that I'm working on with work doesn't get done, is the world going to end? No. So you kind of like try to level set with yourself. But then, that's also the mental exhaustion where now you're level setting with yourself and making like deals and compromises with yourself when you're like what you're doing with work because, your family matters and you're trying to create this balance where, you're there for people. And that includes when you have a job that is very demanding of your emotional energy and you're giving to people. And so, the biggest feelings were like I'm not going to be able to do this without letting someone down. And I think what you realize is when you actually let people in and you share with them what's going on, it completely changes the expectations. People don't know unless you tell them. And when you try to be the person that's there for everyone, sometimes you just have to put the guard down and let those people also be there for you. And, for me, sometimes that was even not getting to go to a cardiologist appointment for my parent, but instead emailing the doctor, like finding ways to problem solve. And when you get overwhelmed, you just kind of forget to problem solve. And, there's more than one way to do things. And so I would just go through the day where you're on autopilot. You're going between autopilot and overwhelm. And that's not a strategic way to get through your day. But when you're treading water, sometimes that's the only way to get through your day. And then you go right back into parent mode. Your child gets home. Now you're doing homework. And so there's never that time to reset yourself and, kind of restore, replenish your emotional bank account. And so then it becomes further depleted. And that's that feeling of like, oh my gosh, I am so burnt out. I'm so on overdrive. I don't have anything else to give to anyone, much less myself. And so that's kind of where you go to bed and you can't sleep because you're thinking about all the things you didn't get done. And then that continues that cycle. So it's a very difficult cycle of a mental battle that just continues on for an entire day.
Did you ever have a moment of false clarity where you thought you found the thing, but once you did it, it clearly wasn't it? What happened?
False clarity. Gosh, there's so many moments of that. I don't even know if it's false clarity. It's just not the clarity that answers and solves the problems. We try to teach people in our organization that, when you work with entrepreneurs, you're in a sale a lot. And you're going to make bets on something that, statistically speaking, work. And yet you're telling them to keep pushing and, to pivot when they need to. And yet we don't do that with ourselves when we're burning out. And so, part of, I think, the process is, it's not really false clarity. It is clarity that is probably a stepping stone to what you really need to get to. And so I think when we look at things as very binary, it's like false or false or true, right? Then you don't see the value in the stepping stone that becomes to get you to where you need to be. And so trying to look at things like, okay, that wasn't the answer, and that's okay, but it helped shine some light, or it helped create a conversation, or that reframe that can happen when you take something that wasn't the right path and you shift it and you reframe it as, but it did get me to realize this. And so really trying to reframe that clarity as it's a guiding light. It's not the only way.
What was the real turning point moment where something finally clicked for you? Walk me through that.
For me, the turning point is always being to stop putting the pressure on myself that I have to have it figured out for everyone, and to allow myself to have other people look out for me. In the same way that I love pouring into people, I love being able to be there for them through the ups and downs. I have to remember that other people feel like that about me. And it is a gift that I get to pour into entrepreneurs, that I get to be there for them. And other people want to give me that same gift. And so it is always, for me, being willing to take the mask off, be vulnerable, not have it all together, have the messy conversation to say, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Here's what's going on. And it doesn't necessarily solve the problem. And in this case, kind of having that breakthrough moment didn't solve the problem. It was just allowing people in, and the validation that I wasn't in it alone, that there are people who have a lot of wisdom that can, sometimes all you need is validation. You need someone to remind you that what you're going through is tough, that they've been there. You're stepping into a journey in your life when you are in this sandwich generation where there's no way you could prepare for it. Watching your parents age, knowing that inevitably, they may not be with you. They won't be with you. Dealing with that mortality piece. There's all of these different pieces that go into it. And when you can let other people in, it's amazing how many, the richness of what you get back is you hear their story. They lost a parent, or they struggled with a parent, and creates this bond. And so for me, what was really the turning point was, it's like phoning a friend, talking to my board chair about the stuff that was stressing me with work, and just getting, the validation of, yes, that is frustrating. And here, let me help you, instead of me being the one that has to carry the load alone. And so that takes a little bit off. And then the next with my son, being able to ask a friend to say, hey, can my son hang out with you tonight just to give me a breather? And so doing these little things. And then with my parents, switching from the fear of losing them to the gratitude of having them, and just really wanting to soak in every moment. And each of those things requires, you have to, reframe, and again, kind of what we were talking about earlier about when you're exhausted and you're tired and you're not sleeping, your emotions get so out of whack that your ability to reframe lessens. And so for me, what is always the thing that gets me out of that kind of spiral back into, where I, 99.9% of the time sit, is letting other people in, doing the things that I tell them to do. Hey, we can't help if we don't know what's going on. And, it's kind of like, okay, sometimes you need that advice for yourself. And that is always the thing that changes it.
If you had to put a name on the mindset shift that pulled you up this season, what would you call it?
I think it comes down, for me, it is the art of the reframe. the mindset shift is the reframe. It is, you know, in the situation that I was talking about earlier, nothing changed from a business perspective, personal perspective, family health perspective. What shifted was the reframe, was the, being able to go from, oh, here's how everything's spiraling to, hey, here's, I have people helping me carry, the burden here. I'm not in this alone. And here's all these people who want to help, and the gifts that you have. And so for me, it would definitely be the art of the reframe. That is the way that you, kind of level set with yourself to pull yourself out of something, is really reframing it from a downward spiral into, what are the gifts? What is the gratitude that I can have in the midst of all this? And if you can find gratitude and reframe it within kind of the view of gratitude of, I have this job that I love, and yes, it's very stressful, but I love it. And I have parents that I love, and yes, they're struggling with their health, but I have this time with them, and a lot of people don't. The reframe and the gratitude that comes from that is definitely what I would call that mindset reshift.
How has your definition of success changed from when you were lost to where you are now?
Such a great question. Success is not, again, kind of when we were talking about the false clarity, success is so not black and white. It isn't a series of, you're not watching, a Chiefs game. It's not a series of like wins and losses. Success is really about getting back up and continuing to move forward and continuing to, take the gratitude that helps ground you in a time of, when you're struggling with burnout. And, when you can kind of shift yourself to that, and not look at it as success is X. Success is continuing to stay in the game, win or lose, continuing to push forward with gratitude, with resilience. Because at the end of the day, the more resilience we have, the more hard things we go through. If you can come through those things with a spirit of gratitude and a spirit of, grace and kindness, and not become bitter, not become, negative. If you can have the kind of resilience that allows you to channel negativity into something positive that is momentum, succeed or fail, to me, that is true success.
For someone watching this who feels as lost as you did back then, what's one line you'd say to them?
I would say that there's always hope. That I have had the gift of watching people in business and in life go through very difficult things and come out on the other side when it felt like all hope was lost. And so hope is not lost. And some of the things that you need to remind yourself of when you're struggling is that reaching out is okay. It's not weakness. That people want to be there for you in a way that the only way you'll realize it is if you actually reach out. Because you'll tell yourself that, you don't want to be a burden and all those things. And so the key is really reaching out, not losing hope, and recognizing that the battle that you're in right now a storm does not last forever. This will not last forever. There is an end to it. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. Allow other people in to help shine the light at the end of the tunnel even brighter.
What book, video, or convo hit you so hard it actually changed how you saw yourself or your fat?
There is there are a number of podcasts. I'm a big fan of Brene Brown and her work on leaders showing up, being willing to have vulnerable conversations. And, she has a podcast, so I credit her work a lot for being able to teach us that, especially as leaders, we have to be willing to show up in vulnerable places, be willing to share our experiences, even the messy ones, even the ones that we probably prefer not to talk about, especially in business. The most successful entrepreneurs who are also great leaders are the ones who are willing to talk about their failures, because we all have them. And when we pretend that we don't, we really rob people of the gift of being able to see themselves in us and see the hope that, oh, they had failures too, and they still were incredibly successful. And so Brené Brown's work on courageous conversations and vulnerability and leadership really just does such a wonderful job of reminding leaders to show up with courage, to show up with vulnerability, and lead by example in those ways.
That's it for this episode of MindShift. This series is presented by Startland News, KC's nonprofit newsroom for startups and innovators. Produced by Social Apex Media, a Kansas City marketing and content studio. If this hit for you, share it with another entrepreneur and subscribe for the next video.